live now. Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
Hello.
God, now I'm down this research rabbit hole. I should not go into this right now.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to. Somebody asked a question that we'll get to later that we don't really have an answer for, and so Ethan was looking it up, and then it turned 4 o'clock, so we had to go live legally.
Yeah.
Legally obligated to be live.
We should probably just save that question for next time so you can give me a chance to actually read about it.
Probably. Yeah. It's my first time seeing it too, so.
Yeah, I had not heard of it. And the Wikipedia page for it is very, very short and does not include many of the things this person is asking about. So I will have to go actually read some linguistics papers about it.
You do that. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
What are you drinking today?
I am drinking a Modelo Gelada with limón y sal.
Love it.
Yeah. Saw it at the store and I was like, that's good. That's a good thing to do today.
I have a Ráfaga pale ale. It's quite good.
Interesting. Does it feel,
But there's a nick.
feel like you're being hit like a gust of wind by it? Yeah.
Actually, it's quite warm in here, and it does sort of feel very cooling, as if like a gust of wind. So, I would say that it lives up to the name. But there is a nick on the rim of the can, which is not fun. I would like a refund, please, or sandpaper.
Yeah, or you can pour it into a cup.
Nah.
Okay.
I don't have good
Live
beer
dangerously.
cups. Yeah. I want Tetris, not Tetris. Tinnitus? Nope, not that one either.
Tetanus?
Tetanus, thank you.
I got you. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, I was just being close twice to make it correct.
No, I don't know. So, Ben and I are twinsies today because every other time we fight over who gets to wear the purple shirt. And today, neither of us wanted to concede, so.
We both win. We're all winners.
We both win. Twinsies.
I like this shirt. I do.
I love the purple shirt. It's such a nice color.
I agree. Good choice.
Yeah, it's heathered purple. We used to also offer dark purple. Actually, we might still offer dark purple, but it's not as nice. Like the heathered purple is a really nice color. It goes well with jeans. Excellent. I might have to get a second one.
I'd get a second one.
Yeah.
But
I still want to get a Refold shirt with the Mexican flag. I know we have the one with the Spanish flag, but
I also want one of those. That'd be fun.
Yeah. We should have Nahum make a design for us.
Yeah, the Mexican flag is just cooler. It's got an eagle on it.
It's already got a bird, right? Like we just put our bird over their bird.
Yeah. You made this? I made this.
Yeah. This is mine.
This is your design from an important time in the history of a whole country? No, it's ours.
No, certainly not. History, what's that?
Speaking of history, how's your language learning history in the past couple of days going?
This week has been interesting. This is definitely an off week for me in terms of just general energy levels. But I have mostly managed to stay writing every day. I started doing corrections on the thing that I was writing the past 2 weeks. And today I broke my streak, which I'm sad about, but that's fine. And yeah, so next phase is doing more in-depth corrections and trying to rephrase and get some feedback on it. So
get roasted by the teacher.
Exactly. Honestly, by ChatGPT.
It's even worse because it doesn't even understand what a mistake is.
It's usually pretty polite about it, but it's we've changed this word for a more natural feeling, and it's how do you know what a natural feeling is? You're a computer.
Get your robot, yeah.
Occasionally it'll suggest something, and I'm like, no, that is not the word I want there. I'm gonna stick with my word.
Yeah, it's got definitely got a weird accent. So it's it just sucks in Spanish and it doesn't really understand the differences in what you're trying to do.
Yep.
Something that I've had weird trouble with Czech recently is I'll have it correct a small sentence, and it'll I tell it not to remove things, and it will just remove things. I want it to be written like it's spoken, not like the literary Czech. It's fine, but it just does not know spoken Czech very well.
It does not surprise me.
Yeah, but at least it's good
Its
at spelling.
corpus
So
is exclusively written, so.
yep. Plus, there's also not very good Czech subtitles, so I'm not surprised that it's not great at like writing Czech or writing spoken Czech.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
Are you using 4.0 or?
Yeah, I'm using 4.0 right now, but I've been seeing that Claude 3.5 Sonnet is supposed to be better in a lot of things. I'm curious to try it.
Yeah, I tried switching to 4.0 and it just ignores my instructions, so I switched back to just 4.
4? Oh, right.
Yeah.
I haven't had issues like that. I like that
I
it's
haven't tried it
faster.
in a month or two, so might be better now.
Llama 3 something came out just a couple days ago, and that's been interesting. But
Llama.
And Meta sort of talking about how they're actually being a lot more honest about it, being like, there's not a whole lot of things that you can improve on anymore. Like from all of our analysis, like there's a very upper limit, and these are not they're large language models. They're not AI really, like the way that we think about it. It's like really think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important for a lot of other industries. Actually, for language learners, large language models are what we want. So like that's actually quite nice. We just want something to be like, yes, this is how you spell that word. No, that's not what that means, and that sort of thing. But they are not very good for. Yeah, they're still terrible for so many things.
Yeah, I feel like more than half the corrections are we added an accent to this word. I'm like, that's not. Okay. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, I know I need to get better at putting the right accents in the right words, but so many native don't do it. And so like when we're talking to people in the chat, I just like get really lazy because no one else does it either.
Yeah, nobody needs it except for ChatGPT and the RAI. But
yep. And
anyways,
the CIFR.
we are diverging already. Saludos desde Mexico, says Michael Carrillo. Saludos
Bienvenido.
desde Mexico también. And then Gorgpag asks if this is Firsty Thursday, which it is.
It is.
I'm Pale Ale. And we're
no, it's definitely Lasty Thursday, but
Lasty?
You said Firsty.
Oh. I don't understand millennial humor.
Oh, you Gen Zers.
God, I don't understand Gen Z humor either. It's
with your cap up. And your Riz.
Yeah, I turned into, I'd like turn on a stream for like 5 seconds, and somebody said "Life is Roblox," and I was like, "This is not English anymore." I closed it. It's like, what is that? What does that mean?
Complete side tangent. Have you seen the Gen Z court case? It's like a YouTube video.
Oh God.
All right, I'll send it to you afterwards.
I think I heard something about it, and that sounds like it. Like it would be a impossible thing to understand.
Yeah.
What's easier to understand, legalese or 15-year-olds?
Oh God, I don't know. I feel like legalese you can actually just Google the words, whereas 15-year-old you can't. So with tools, legalese.
Okay. Intensive immersion, legalese.
Yeah.
Speaking of intensive immersion, let's divert and talk about questions.
Let's transition to another topic.
Yeah. So the first question for July comes from Alexander, and they ask, is starting with Pimsleur good for pronunciation? What are your opinions on Pimsleur for trying to have good pronunciation from the start?
It's not worth the time. Pimsleur was actually the very first thing that I did when I started studying Spanish. I spent about 30 hours on it. And no, it was not a good use of time. There's sort of two main issues with it. One of which is that the audio that they use is not what people actually talk like. The words that they use are not what people use in regular conversation, and the way they say those things is not the way that a native would actually say those things. So, and then also you don't get any feedback. Like you can only hear yourself, and one of the major issues that new learners face is they don't actually have the ability to hear the sounds of a foreign language. So if you can't hear them, you can't imitate them, and you can't tell whether you're doing it right or wrong. So I personally don't like Pimsleur. Granted, I used it back in 2015, so like maybe it's better now. I don't know, but my general perspective on Pimsleur is that their entire model of language learning is flawed, and it's not a great use of time.
Yeah, I used it for a little bit. Also, like probably around that time. I don't even remember for what language. I was like, this is not what I want. This is not
Yeah.
working. This is not helpful.
Yep.
If you want to have good pronunciation, there's a lot of other factors beyond. There's a lot of other factors going on. Some of them are like natural talent, your ability to hear sounds, but then also it's your how much you care about it and the amount of time that you're willing to put in. If you put in time to learning and understanding about like how sounds work and how accents actually work, you're going to have a lot more success in sounding good from the start. Um, but then also, we'd really recommend learning the sounds of the language from a perceptive stance. We'll talk about this in another question pretty soon, but when you can hear the sounds of a language, you can much more accurately learn them and self-correct. Because like Ethan said, if you can't hear the difference between two different sounds, it's really, really hard to learn to produce them really well. A pretty famous example is Japanese learners learning Japanese speakers learning English or really any other European language, because we have a distinction between R and L that is non-existent in Japanese, and it makes it really, really hard for them to produce the right one. Many of them can physically produce the right sound. They can physically create R and L easily. But when they hear a word, it's a complete guess if it's a R or an R or an L word. They just have no idea. And so if you can train that ability, then you can start to self-correct. And you might be wrong at the beginning, but you'll very, very quickly fix it. And so that's what I definitely recommend you do if you want to have good pronunciation, is really make sure that your ear is good first, and then you will self-correct as long as you have you're working on the other things and continuously trying to improve.
The other thing that I would say is if you really, really care about it, it is worthwhile learning what sounds exist in a language. So learning IPA, really digging in to understand like what sounds do exist, because even if you can't hear them right now, knowing that they exist will help you hear them in the future because you'll know to look out for them.
Good point.
You can practice those in particular. So, for me, like I generally have a pretty good ear, so it hasn't really been a problem to reproduce sounds once I could hear them. But I know Ben really enjoys IPA and enjoys really digging into sound study of it, and I'm sure that his accent is substantially better than mine. So,
an example is that when I started learning Czech, I think I took like an hour maybe to read through the Czech Wikipedia article on phonology and sounds, just to hear just get a rundown of what sounds sort of existed. And I haven't gone back, and I'm able to hear all the sounds of Czech just fine. Yes, I have predisposition. It is something that I've studied before, like in other languages. But like that is an example of being able to reap all the benefits much more quickly with a little bit of study. Next question here.
Thanks for the question. Awkward ending.
When you don't know what to say. Have you ever had
Thank you for the question.
that you couldn't that you had? Have you ever? Okay, the next question here is from Hilnik. I'm not exactly sure how they want it said, but they ask, "What do you do when language learning becomes boring?" Motivation is a limited resource, and once that runs low, sitting down and consuming media where you have to focus hard to follow along becomes a lot less appealing. When this happens, how do you keep at it without it feeling like a chore or burning yourself out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's entirely avoidable. At some point, it always feels like a chore. Something will always feel like a chore, and whether that's going to the gym or oftentimes brushing your teeth can even feel like a chore. So it's not so much about avoiding that state of being. It's, what do you do when that happens? And there's sort of two schools of thought. One is you build up such a strong habit of it that even when it isn't pleasant, it's not unpleasant. So it's sort of like just a neutral feeling. Um, and this is what a lot of professional musicians say when they're doing their scales every morning. They spend an hour or 2 hours just doing essentially boring music just to as their warm up. And it's not that that becomes fun for them, it's just becomes part of their day. It's a neutral activity that doesn't make them feel bad. So one school of thought is just get to the point where that harder stuff is not a painful activity for you. The other one is find something that motivates you, something that inspires you again. So either uh, finding a piece of content that you really want to consume, finding a book that you really want to consume, or sometimes just starting to talk to people can give you the desire to be like, oh, actually, I really want to improve now. The On my end, like I've definitely gone through periods of low energy, and it really can just be kind of a grind getting through that for a week or two. But then my energy generally comes back. Usually, my like low periods only last for a month or so, unless I'm like really burned out. Um, so if you need to tone down the learning in order to recuperate your energy, that's also a completely valid approach to um, regaining the level of interest in the language that you want. And some people take a break and they go and do something else for a month and they come back, and that's enough to revitalize them. So don't feel obligated to be there every single day forever. It is okay to occasionally take breaks and revitalize. People in sports, professional sports players, they take the summers off, right? They have the off season. They continue to do things that are physical, but they stop working out, so they give their bodies time to recover. They give their brains and their motivation and their spirit time to recover for the next season when they do a big push. So it is okay to occasionally have an off season.
Cloudy also says that doing things that are a little bit easier, that maybe you are more, that you like more, right? Just to keep up the habit or keep up doing it, but not feel as much pressure to perform is also a thing you can do,
Totally.
which is very similar to what you said. But yeah, so if you like watching YouTube, even though you only understand whatever 60%, doing that for a bit is also good.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd say on this is that there's a certain point when it becomes a lot easier to have fun, right? Because if you're a 8-day beginner, right, you've been studying for 8 days, you can't really sit down and have fun easily. It's like you said, it's a huge struggle to like focus and pick up on anything when you're that early on. And so that's why being able to push through that is sort of important, because you can have fun otherwise, but it does take more effort. And so there's a certain fun threshold that we talk about, where once you reach that fun threshold, that's when you can kind of let off the brakes a little bit, but still continue forward in the language, because no, let off the gas a little bit, but still make progress, because having fun is easier. And so trying to get to that point can be a good goal, because then it just becomes a lot easier to coast and not like lose progress. But it's also kind of a far goal.
Depending on the language.
I mean, it's definitely a couple hundred hours in, which is
yeah.
a pretty big commitment, unless you're like a gamer or One Piece fan.
Yeah.
Then 100 hours is like an afternoon.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
100 hours in an afternoon. Love it.
So I swear, some people that like have 10K hours in a video game, like, how did you do that? How did you play 10,000 hours of a video game? But whatever.
10 hours a day for 3 years.
Speaking of 10 hours a day for 3 years, again, terrible segue. We have a question here from Rayone, who asks about if there's any plans for a Korean IPA deck. They're having a lot of issues with the sounds of Korean and would love a deck to learn them, essentially. So we made a couple of IPA decks for English and Spanish, probably like a year ago at this point. When was that? But the idea was to teach the sounds of the language in order to better hear them and to draw attention to them. We haven't made any more because they are decks and they do take a lot to produce. They're not quite as big as 1K decks, but like going through all the sounds, making sure that you understand them, you get your recordings. Like it's a whole process. And so we haven't done any more, but we would like to. Like it's not like a bad thing. We find them really useful and they're really cool.
They're just
We
not
are
at the
currently
top of our priority list.
right. We are currently working on some phonetic sound system decks, which are going to be released for free on Anki Web and yeah, on Anki Web and on our site. But those are slightly different. They're similar, but the idea with a phonetic writing system deck is to learn to read the um, like the letters of the language, essentially how the language writes sounds, which is connected to the IPA and sounds, but it's I would say it's a little bit reversed. When you learn the sounds, you learn to distinguish them, you learn the differences. But when you learn the letters, you learn how to spell things, if that makes sense, or how to read things in your head. And so we will have one of those for Korean, hopefully soon. Once I think we're looking for a native to record things still. Yeah, Clayton just put in chat that we're just looking for a native volunteer for the Korean decks. So if you're a Korean speaker natively, reach out to Clayton at refold.la if you want to do. It's like 20 minutes of recording, and we can make something that's really helpful for this. But a true like
Also, a free
Korean,
product for the
yeah,
community.
free unpaid product, yeah. Um, and oh, but a true IPA deck, not quite yet. Maybe though. Korean's
Yeah.
interesting. The sounds that it has are kind of cool. There's a pretty unique split in some of the consonants, but and learning to hear that is important. But we don't have any plans currently.
Yeah. We have these, as Ben was talking about, these two different types of decks. One of them focused on sounds, and one of them focused on the writing system. Because what we found is that a lot of folks, when, especially with a language like English that's very inconsistent, you have to learn what series of letters can produce what sounds. And so it's very important, and we focus on reading as one of the primary goals that you start with. So you have to learn those things very quickly in order to be able to read effectively. For the sound system decks, I do think we have a model for them. Like we've designed sort of what they would look like. We have the examples that we've done so far, and we've got some new thinking on it. But yeah, it's definitely not at the top of our priority list currently.
We will talk about the top of our priority list later in the stream, though.
We could talk about it right now.
If you want to, sure.
Yeah.
Intermission. What's at the top of our priority list, Ethan?
Yeah, so as some people know, we've been working on an app. I've mentioned it a few times on the Q&A. And the purpose of the app is to help you track your time with language learning. We've been looking at what kind of app should we develop for a long time, and we really didn't want to build something until we understood the needs of the community. And one of the things that's come up over and over again is that understanding how much time you're putting in and what you're putting your time into has sort of been the number one factor to success. So we've encountered this with clients where we need to identify exactly what they're doing in order to give them the best advice. And what we find is people are very bad at actually understanding what they're doing if they're not measuring effectively. So historically, people have used Toggle for this, or Polylogger, or just a spreadsheet, but there's no real consistency across those things. Everyone sets them up differently. And so this seemed like a really prime thing for us to focus on to help the community track their time and make sure that they're spending it on the right things. And it also opens up this world of being able to actually do research on language acquisition, because if we can measure how much time you're spending and what activities you're doing, and we can test you on what results that produces, we can start to draw conclusions of what is the most effective way to learn a language and make the recommendations based on very extensive data, which is honestly quite lacking in the language acquisition sphere. Most language acquisition research papers and studies are very small subsets of people for very short periods of time. Honestly, the exception to this is actually Duolingo. They're the ones that have like much more data, but they still are very focused on their like sort of gamified platform and not much beyond that. So we're hoping that this is an opportunity for us to really start to study language acquisition at a really large scale in order to put some data behind our recommendations so that it's not just based on anecdotes, which like anecdotes are great. We've got thousands of them, but having the data to back it up, in addition to demonstrate the efficacy, is really the future of where we want to go. So
Totally.
and the other aspect is changing your habits is hard, and integrating the language into your life is a challenge. And so having a tool that's specifically designed to help you do that, I have found it very motivating. I'm able to see sort of like what is my success rate over the past 6 weeks, how much am I actually doing the things, what are my total number of hours on each of my goals that I've set, and then also how other people in the community are doing. I can see, I can aspire to be as engaged with my language as other folks in the community. So we've launched to a pretty small subset of folks right now. Our internal team has been using it for about 2 months, and then launched it to moderators and admins about a week ago. But if you are interested in joining up and wanting to get into the app early and help shape the way that it looks and the way that it feels and what features it has, definitely sign up for the waitlist. The link will be in the description. It's also on the screen here. And in that form, there's a selection where you can decide like when do you want to be included in the app. So it'll go through 4 phases of release. The first being like, yeah, there's bugs. It's inevitable. We're hoping people come in and like help work through all those bugs and report them. And then the next phase is people who want it to be a little bit more stable and are willing to put up with some UX problems. And then there's phase 3 and 4. 4 is like general release. Phase 3 is sort of like internal. You understand Refold. You've been part of the community. So you can select when you want to join, and we'll let you know when that phase is ready. We're really looking forward to having the community on the app. I think we're going to see a lot of cool behavior and a lot of cool collaboration towards language learning. And I'm really excited to see the number that we have going up every day of hours recorded. So
yeah, it's exciting. I haven't been using the app yet because I track on my computer, and so it's awkward to be on my phone, but I really want to. Like, it's making me want to start like a language just for no reason other than to use the app, because I feel like I'm missing out on being there with like the small community and people, and people seem to like it.
Yeah, we're definitely going to release a web version in the not too distant future because enough people have asked for it. So
let's go.
But we gotta design that and figure out how that's going to work, because that was not part of our original plan.
We have a roaring testimonial from Cloudy. It says the app is pretty cool, smiley face. But they also say that they've been using it because it's more convenient than Toggle, which is great. So if Toggle's been a little bit annoying, definitely check out the app.
I also found Toggle a little annoying, so I've found the app to be much more straightforward.
Cool. So check out the link for sure. Anybody. I'm also going to leave the link on screen because I saw that we had a question in here from Moaz. And they asked, I'm at an intermediate-ish level about B1 in French. Is Refold for me, or is Refold mostly for beginners?
Refold is not mostly for beginners. We definitely have been focusing a lot on beginners because they're the ones who really need the most assistance getting into the state of language learning. But our goal is to help you reach whatever your target goal is. So, I personally would love a level of fluency that is on par with my English fluency. I don't think I'll ever get there. I think that's like very, very long road, but you can get pretty close. And so if you're a B1, absolutely, you should definitely join the community and read through the guide. Our goal is to really get you to that high level of fluency that you want, assuming you want a C1, C2 ability. There's definitely members in our community who have achieved C2 certifications, and then also, or in other languages, the highest level of certifications there. So if you're looking for a high level of fluency, 100%. I would actually say that we are one of the few games in town when it comes to that really high level of instinctual fluency. I haven't really seen much else out there in terms of guiding people at that level.
Yeah, the reality of like marketing and being a company is that there are more beginners out there. The number of people that get past the beginner stage in a language is pretty small, and so focusing on them isn't a huge priority, which is why pretty much all language learning tools will start from beginner and will kind of assume you're a beginner. I think Duolingo, you can't even uh, just unlock everything if you wanted to like start halfway down. I think
Mhm.
you have to manually do it. Lamont actually says if you want to do that, cheat on the tests just to unlock everything and then start where you feel comfortable,
Mhm.
which isn't a great endorsement. But we definitely have a lot of support for people that are in this phase of just trying to enjoy the language, really level up their skills, and um, well, those two things really. I think
Yeah. I mean, I
enjoying the
think
language.
what you know, I had this issue with drops recently. I downloaded drops because I was looking for like something to reinforce my vocabulary.
Hmm.
And I had heard that drops provided like really advanced vocabulary, but I couldn't figure out a way to skip the beginner vocabulary. And like based on our tests, I know around 9,000 words, so I don't need the beginner vocabulary. But because I couldn't test out of it and couldn't skip it at all, I just dropped it because it like wasn't worth it. Um,
Ironic, right?
yeah, dropped. um, so I think actually we do. If you aren't a beginner, I think we do a really good job because we have everything available to you for you just to jump in at the level that you're at. There's no barrier to you have to go back to the beginning. You have to like start from scratch. uh, the methodology and the tools and the resources all adapt to you personally, whether that is your personal interests or your personal level or your personal goals. So it's very configurable. You can basically do whatever you want it to. So definitely give it a shot. And if you have any issues or need some help, ask in the community. We'll definitely be able to help you.
Thank you for the question. Let's go back to the list here, the original list. We've got a couple of Anki questions really quick. So the first question is Anki necessary? This comes from Sebastian, 1991. And they say, I like to read, but Anki is a pain. I imagine that might mean that I need to do it, but I'm wanting to know what you guys think. I've read 1.1 million words already, and I have a decent vocab. I want to start intensively listening, but I just want some confirmation that's a good idea.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
do it.
you should definitely do that. Is Anki necessary? No, it's definitely not necessary. It is an optimization. It is an optimization that is very useful. That honestly, a lot of people probably would not be successful without that optimization. But if you've already read 1.1 million words in your target language, you probably don't need Anki because you're already getting a natural SRS through exposure to the language. You are seeing the same words over and over again, and that is essentially a spaced repetition system. It's just organic. Um, the um, there was a video a long while back where um, the idea was that Anki is really, really valuable in the beginning because you are not getting enough exposure to the language to get the repetition of the words that you need. So it's really helpful to start getting that up to speed just on the basics.
You
And
also
then,
aren't getting, like, you might be getting enough exposure, but you're not really getting enough understanding and comprehension of that exposure.
sure.
So, like, if you learn a word on Monday, you might see it on Tuesday and Wednesday, but like not really get it. And
Hmm.
so, repping it in Anki keeps that right and fresh and gives you more exposure. That's a little unnatural, but does just help it stay right at the top of your mind.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
it's very useful in the beginning stages. And then after a while, like the just immersion itself can mostly give you enough repetitions for all of the common words that so that you don't need Anki to reinforce that. It can be
Hmm.
helpful, it can optimize it, but it's not necessary. But then later on, you run into the situation where the words you're learning are rare enough that they don't appear that often in immersion. You might only come across a word every once a week or once a month, and so that's not often enough to reinforce that word. So Anki becomes useful again to reinforce things that are rarer that you're not going to come across as often. And that's purely focused on vocab. Anki has a bunch of other uses too. Like I use Anki as a prompt generator for like just practicing speaking. Just it gives me a word or it gives me a sentence or a question, and I'll like just respond to it. Um, so it's not just a vocab tool. Like you can use it for lots of different things. But for the question about vocab tools, it's great at the beginning and it's great when you're higher level. In the middle, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I've been using it as a chorusing thing. Whereas when I chorus a sentence and then like once I want to save, I'll transcribe, correct, and then save. And then I'll just rep them only like a couple times a day just to say the sentence again, hear the audio again, say it a couple times, then move on. I'd never fail those cards, but it's nice to get that spaced repetition.
Yeah.
Something that helps me kind of understand what Anki does is that it did not come before human memory. Human memory, or like especially around language, came before, and then Anki is a way to figure out, okay, how does that maybe work, and how can we adapt into it, right? Or how do we essentially mimic how humans memorize things and learn things? And so the way that when you read or just use language normally, that is a natural SRS, and Anki is actually replicating that. So if you don't need that unnatural repetition or replication, you don't need to use it, right? Reading is fantastic for SRS in the middle phases, intermediate phases. So, yeah. Thank you for the question. We have a kind of related question here, which is about FSRS, which is I'll explain in a second. So Jeremy asks, should I switch to FSRS? And FSRS is the new flashcard repetition system. It's an algorithm on Anki, basically. It's the new one, but it's an optional thing. And so it's a thing you have to opt into. You have to scroll down to your settings. So you click on the gear, you go very bottom, you click on FSRS, you can turn it on. And I'll answer it in a second. But the actual question is, they tried switching to FSRS and if they failed, and they were having some trouble with FSRS when they switched to it, and they felt like it was really messing with their Anki because they were learning new kanji, new words, and all these things. They think that it's going to balance out over time, but they kind of were a little bit worried, and so they said, "What are other people's experiences with this new algorithm? Are they just overthinking things, or is it actually working properly?" So, in my experience, FSRS is always a good thing. It will reduce your Anki reviews while increasing your retention. I'm sure you can set it up wrong if you like mess with things, but if you just turn it on and like click the optimizer, it should just do things totally fine because it kind of learns along with you and improves your reviews over time. If you have a really, really customized Anki deck and like years of history, maybe don't because you're probably fine, but you've also probably shouldn't be doing that much Anki. But for anybody that's new to Anki or anybody that wants to reduce their review time, definitely enable FSRS because I've only seen it do good things. I've only seen it reduce time. Like I said, if you want to turn it on, go into your Anki settings. You have to be updated, so maybe download the recent update of Anki. Click on the settings on the specific deck, scroll all the way down, and then you'll find the FSRS, I think like the second at the bottom, and there's a toggle. You just click it on, and then if you want, you can click optimize, but you don't even have to do that. And that's how you turn it on. I've started including it on all of our new Refold decks by default. So if you include the presets when you import the deck, it'll just have it on by default. But some of the old ones that haven't been updated in like a year might not have it on by default.
I have no opinion here. I basically dropped Anki for 2 years and I just got back on it, so I've been out of the loop on all of the updates.
Funny anecdote: we did have a bit of a problem with Anki where the whole team has had Anki installed for a long time, and we were like trying to share things between each other, and like we kind of can't because everybody had a different version that worked for them. And so I had like sent out a memo. I was like, "Okay, everybody, update your Anki. It's time." And so now things work, but we had a couple of days and there were people like, "It's not working for me. What's going on?"
There was a big problem when we were building decks because the newer versions of Anki had the update process for the decks was broken in a couple versions of Anki. So I had to go back to an older version in order to update decks properly. So things have been resolved at this point, but it's that's the challenge with using open source software, right? Like there are problems like that, and there's no financial incentive to fix it immediately.
Well, great. Thank you for the question, Jeremy. I hope that we resolved your problem. Which brings us on to the next question from Adrian, who asks, how do I approach reading as an upper intermediate? I bought a Kindle some time ago and have been loving it. The problem is that it's incredibly slow for taking notes. So like if you want to add stuff to Anki later or even just like look up words, it's pretty slow. It sucks the enjoyment out of reading more than it motivates me to read, but it also feels like a time waster not to take notes and thus not acquiring new vocab, because you can easily do that by watching a movie. They know that loot exists, but it's not portable, and I'd like to avoid sitting down all day. So, is highlighting words as big of a necessity as I originally thought? And how would you get into the habit of reading? Any schedule or reminder for that?
Yeah, I mean, I just picked up my Kindle again. I sort of also fell out of a reading habit and have been rebuilding it, and I was doing lots of highlighting. And then I know that there are some tools for exporting all of those highlights automatically to Anki. I know that Migaku used to have one, but they decommissioned it.
They killed it. That's my favorite part
Yeah,
of the favorite feature, and they just killed it.
I know. So I don't know if anyone has built a equivalent since then.
There are two that I
Okay.
know of. There is vocab sieve and like it's called like Kindle to Anki. You like it's on the web.
Okay.
Um,
So what I would
but
say is, if it's easy to export the highlights to Anki, then I don't see a reason not to do that. Like, I definitely want to give it a try. So highlighting is useful because it forces you to think about, what's going on. Doing the lookups is useful. I would not take notes on a Kindle. That seems like a terrible plan. It is not a nice user interface.
not
It
unless you
is
have like
very,
one of
very
the
slow.
$1,000 ones that has like a phone processor or something. But no,
Yeah.
don't do it.
No, there's like a full second delay between clicking your Kindle and it responding. So I would definitely not take any notes. But just highlighting is a relatively low effort activity in my experience. So as long as you can export it after the fact, there's no downside to doing it. Um, in terms of sort of getting into a reading habit, the strongest reading habit that I've ever had was I used to go for a walk in the morning, and I would walk down to the water, and I would sit there and I would read. I would try to read a whole chapter, or 20, 30 minutes, whatever it was, and then walk back. And walking down with a cup of coffee, it's a really nice morning experience, nice morning routine. So if you can get into a space where you are like going to a space to read, that's a really easy way to start forming that habit. Um, Also, reading before bed, though you can obviously be too tired for that
That's
sometimes.
what I do.
Yeah. I do it sometimes, but recently I've been too tired and I just want to go to sleep. So the reading in the morning has been sort of my prime time for actually having a reading habit. Unfortunately, I'm not doing it right now because I have other morning habits to do, but
Boo.
it's a writing habit. It's good too, but
Okay, fine. You get a pass.
yeah. So going to a different space, having a specific trigger for your reading, setting aside time first thing in the morning to do it, those are great ways to start forming a consistent reading habit. And the other thing that I would say is anytime you start reading something new, at least in my experience, the first two chapters are always suck. Not because the chapters suck, but just because the experience of getting into a new book, I don't personally enjoy.
Hmm.
Once I'm up to speed on what's going on, once I understand the characters or the plot or whatever it is, it's much easier to keep going. Like my favorite book series in Spanish is Guardianes de la Ciudadela, and I struggled to get through the first three chapters of that. And the first three chapters are like very, very intense.
They're
So
really
it's not a
good.
lack of. It's really good. It's really well written. There's lots of action. There's lots of drama. And I just because I didn't understand the world and didn't understand the stories, the first three chapters I just really struggled through. And that's true regardless of whether I'm reading a book in English or Spanish or whatever else. So keep that in mind anytime you start something new. If you feel like, oh, it's dragging, force yourself to get through those first three chapters before you actually judge it.
Yeah, I'd also say going back to the like thing of portability, if you want to use Loot but want it to be on your phone, Link does work on your phone. I don't think it's as good, and it does cost like $16 a month, but that
Oh,
could serve that
$16 a
role.
month?
Yeah,
Wow, that's way more expensive than it used to be.
it might not be that much, but that's what I have in my head. You can look it up if you want.
Okay,
But
I'm gonna
a
look
lot
it
of
up 'cause
people
I'm
do
curious.
like mention the cost as being like a little bit expensive. But you can also you can have different times you read. You don't have to always read on your Kindle. Like I like to read on my phone, on my Kindle, and on Loot. Like for I have different uses for them. And so having different books and different uses for different times can be a great way to read more and achieve your goals that you want. And so try out different things if you want to do that, to mix things up a bit. I don't know.
Yep.
But also, no, if you don't want to highlight words, don't do it. If you understand the story and can follow along, do what you want. Like another thing that's great for that is putting in an audiobook to force you to go along with the story, like while you're reading, because that way you don't uh, get wrapped up on things and you just keep on going with the story and build up that habit. Cool.
And to answer your question, Link is $15 a month if you pay by the month, but if you pay over a year, it's $10 a month.
That's a huge discount for the year.
Mm-hmm. 50,
Crazy.
no, not 50, 30%.
Yeah. Oh, and Claudia also says if you're a kimchi learner, if you're a Korean learner, kimchi reader is uh, slip of the tongue. Sorry. Sorry, Korean learners. If you're a Korean learner, kimchi reader is $5 a month and it's fantastic.
There you go.
If you happen to be a Korean learner.
There you
go. Cool. Another question here comes from Dave5/4, and they. Oh wait, this is one we
Wait,
said.
no, we're gonna skip this one because I need to read
sorry.
about it.
Yeah, we have to read about this. It's called the interface model of language acquisition. So, if you want to be part of the conversation next time, read about that and tune in June, July, August. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see. I'm going to quickly check the chat for any questions. So if anybody in the chat has a question for us, put it in there. I'm going to go back through. Oh, interesting. Mikhail Carrillo says that they're learning Yucatec Maya, which is interesting. And yeah, it's probably really hard to find CI and more subs.
That's a tough one.
I'm working very slowly on a project about creating CI for languages like Nahuatl or a Nahuatl language, which might build. My goal is to build a framework so that anybody could produce CI in any language, even the smallest one with 100 speakers, if they wanted to learn that or to make CI for their heritage language or something. And so hopefully in like a year, I'll have that process down. I've been building up that process slowly with my English CI channel. And so if you're an English learner, you might find my channel interesting. It's called Ben's Language Lab. And the idea is to increase the time that you spend on the language and decrease the other maintenance and editing and all those things to really produce a lot of high quality content. Because to learn a language, it's you kind of need a lot of the language. And so like spending 10 hours to make a 5-minute video just isn't sustainable.
Yeah, we've seen prior to Ben setting up all of his processes, like recording for our internal decks used to take forever, and now he's got it down to a science where he just gives somebody an exact plan and it's just like lickety split, they're done so fast. And one of the issues that we've seen a lot with comprehensible input channels is that whoever is working on the channel loses steam. So most of the channels only have 10, 20, 30 videos on them. But for CI for a language, you really need hundreds and hundreds of videos, the way that Dreaming Spanish has, where they've been publishing videos every single day for 5, 6 years, 7 years, something like that.
Yeah.
But
the thing with Spanish is that it is a very in-demand language, mostly learned by high-income people. And so Dreaming Spanish can charge $5 a month for that. Mm-hmm. But there's just not enough people learning Yucatec Maya to fund a Dreaming Spanish level thing.
Sure.
And so I, as one person, have been producing over 2 hours of content per week I think I spent like way less than an hour per day on this project. And so that's like my goal.
Yeah. So if you can get a native speaker from any language to have like a really streamlined setup where, they can produce at like a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio of time spent versus time produced, then that's actually a tenable situation where they can actually produce the things that are necessary for learners.
Exactly.
So we appreciate Ben's work on that.
I'm enjoying it. I think it's really interesting. We have a sort of question here from Juan Carlos Patiño Hernandez. Can I ask a question? You may. Is it necessary to use an app to learn grammar for at least half an hour a day? And if so, what should I do for English? Or should I just stick with watching series in Anki? And he also says that he's feeling a bit frustrated because doesn't feel like he's making a lot of progress. He's been watching series in English or TV shows in English for like 2 hours a day, and seems to be doing quite well, but feels like he's not making progress.
Okay. We probably need to have more context of why to dig into that, but in terms of grammar, generally the vocabulary is a much, much bigger portion of language than grammar is. For context, native speakers know 20 to 30,000 words in a language, and they are using regularly, 8,000 words in conversation. So you have to be able to understand all of those things in order to participate in conversation or understand a TV show. Grammar is a much, much smaller portion of language, though it definitely gets prioritized in most systems. So in terms of, do you have to spend 30 hours a day? No. Or sorry, 30 minutes a day? No, you don't. You can get by just focusing on vocabulary for a while. I know that someone like Steve Kaufman of Link, his perspective is basically just focus on vocabulary until you can understand and then read about grammar. Once you already have that solid foundation, because it's much easier to understand at that point. We find that a little grammar study can help you to identify words and help you to understand sentences a little earlier on, but you don't need to hyper prioritize it because you're not trying to produce language yet. So in terms of specific resources for English, I would need to go look at what our resource database recommends. I don't know off the top of my head, though I think EF, English First, does offer some grammar resources. But Ben, you got any opinions?
Yeah, I am pretty big on the train of sort of like Steve Kaufman of wait until you're trying to use the grammar to really dive into it. But before that, trying to really understanding the meaning behind structures is helpful. And ironically, I think the most useful way to study that is by asking AI or LLMs and saying, hey, why does this mean this? Why does this mean what it means or whatever? And so in the case of English, if you ask, why does this sentence mean this sort of question, it can actually give you quite a good breakdown of what's happening, and without like using a ton of grammar terms or confusing terminology. It's the same thing. It's basically a more human explanation, ironically, than human-made stuff. Because, and I get into this into a video that I'm still writing, but like the grammar terms came after all of the stuff that we do to express ideas and meaning. And so your goal is to understand those ideas and meaning and start to subconsciously learn the patterns. And so you should focus on the meaning of things. And the grammar often does sort of hide meanings behind them. Why does this order mean that, but this order mean that? I don't really get it. So asking questions like that is very, very helpful. We actually have a free tool in our Refold Central server and also the course server where you can ask a slightly trained AI questions like that, and it will give you a response about sort of what a sentence means and help you to understand it a bit more. And so that's something that I'd recommend that you try. Also because you can get answers in your native language. You don't have to like also worry about understanding the English to understand the English. So you don't want to have to ask a question about a question that you asked a question about, because that'd be confusing. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that. That's all I have to say about that. Um, we had another question here. Where'd it go? Okay, a question from Sun. I'm going to paraphrase, but they basically say that um, they're an upper beginner. They really love doing free flow immersion, but they want to start sentence mining soon. But they're kind of nervous about decreasing their amount of study time because they're going to be constantly starting and stopping, checking things. But then also like the tech and add-ons and stuff is a little bit overwhelming. And I think they are looking for tips and advice on getting into that more intensive side of language learning.
Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about decreasing the number of hours. The intensive, or what we now call interactive, where you're like sitting and working with the language to understand it, is much more valuable time. So you will get more out of an hour of intensive than you will out of an hour of free flow. And the hour of intensive will make your hour of free flow more impactful because you'll be able to understand more. And the process of interactive is really mostly about just trying to break things down and notice things and understand individual words or full sentences. Anything that allows you to understand more than you otherwise would. So from a tooling perspective, the basic tooling is just a pop-up dictionary. Do you look something up? You either understand it, you didn't understand it. You look up, potentially a translation. Did you understand it? Did you not understand it? And that process will force you out of your comfort zone to really understand what's going on. Sentence mining is the next level of that whole process, where it's not just immersing and understanding and working to understand while immersing. You are recording the things you didn't understand in order to practice them over time. And you're right, the technology for sentence mining is unfortunately still quite complicated in a lot of situations. It's definitely improved over the past couple of years. There's been a lot of companies and effort put into making it easier. Some of the things, go ahead.
I have a video coming out, I think next week, about sentence mining and how to set it up. It's a lot more streamlined. Still is a bit techy, but I think it's a lot more beneficial for that, for the average person.
Yes.
Continue.
So yeah, in today's day and age, the tooling has definitely gotten a lot better. It's a lot easier to set up, but it is still a little technical. In the future, I imagine this will be a one-click sentence mining situation. I started working on my own meta layer recently because I wanted one click to get things done, and it's a side project, so I'm not making super fast progress on it. Won't be ready anytime soon. But the very simplest version of sentence mining is literally just copying and pasting a sentence and putting it in Anki. And there's no complications. You don't need anything more than that. It can be nice to have.
You can go a step down and not even put it in Anki and then just look at it in a text document.
That's true. I've also seen people do that where they just copy and paste sentences into a text document. So you can go as low or as high tech with this as you want. If you're scared of the tech, keep it low tech. You can always improve later. You can always do more tech later. Keep it low tech. Just get the basics in place. I think the very basic version that I would recommend is just using Anki, creating a dumb deck with just like a front and a back, and just copying and pasting a sentence on it, and that's it.
The video will actually have a downloadable card type that you can use and just import. And that way, when you make your cards, they at least look nice. They're still pretty simple in like what they have on them, but you can have them. You can ensure that they look professional if you like that sort of thing, which I think you should do.
Yeah. My cards are so ugly.
Yeah.
It is literally just black text on a white background. That's it.
Yeah. I have a 1,070 day Anki streak or something like that, and I'm writing a video right now called "How to Get a 1,000 Day Anki Streak." And tip number one is to like make it a little bit nice to do so that it just doesn't look horrendous. Yep. So when someone looks over your shoulder, they don't go, "What is that app from 2001?" Like it actually looks real and like a functional thing. So I think that's important, but yeah.
So wait for Ben's video to come out soon, and then you'll have much less fear of doing sentence mining. Yeah. But yes, I would 100% recommend getting into sentence mining if you're already past, say, the 2,000 word mark. in your language learning, like definitely start up sentence mining. That's where you're going to see the most gains.
Yeah.
And
And
also dedicate some time to the interactive immersion, more intensive reading. So
totally. And I also recommend this to Gwen from finance, who asks what they should do at a low A2 level when they're trying to get from watching content made for learners to content made for natives.
mhm.
And really slowing down and forcing yourself to work through sentences and look things up is a really good pattern for um, improving your understanding, essentially. Like you
Yeah,
will learn the words that natives actually use a lot more quickly, and you can also have a lot more fun. I really like interactive. Yes,
yeah,
I go a lot slower, but I'm okay with that. I don't need to finish this TV show in a single day. Like I watch a scene or two and I feel good that I understood the scene or two.
yeah.
And so doing things like that is very, very helpful for bridging that gap between non-native and native content.
Yeah, in my own experience, like I was doing mostly free flow, but before Refold started, I was doing mostly free flow with Spanish, and I was like really struggling to come up to speed. And then I decided to do the intensive reading process with Pokemon of all things, and it's like there's only 2,200 unique words in the entire first season of Pokemon. So like it is very doable with intensive reading. And then from
That's a
that I
great
moved
tip.
on. Yeah. So like choose an easier piece of content with a lower vocabulary threshold, and it definitely is easier. And when I came out of that, that's when I was able to like jump into real native content. And I still struggled. Like this was a trope back in the early days of Refold, where everyone in the Spanish server watched Silvana Sin Lana as like the piece of content because it's a sitcom with like 120-hour long episodes. And at the beginning of that process, I could not understand what they were saying. And by probably episode 80, I was barely stopping to look things up. Um, so 80 hours of intensive immersion of reading this TV show, and I was off to the races like basically
80
every time.
content hours.
80 content hours. Yes, it took
Yeah. So you,
longer of
yeah, it's probably
actual
like,
my time.
yeah. Yeah. I recently, so I was doing a lot of intensive immersion and like intensive reading and then eventually intensive listening with a TV show in Czech, a lot like that, where it's a sitcom, very not a good TV show, but a great for learning show. Um, and at a certain point, I actually turned off autopause because it became easier to understand without pausing, without subtitles, like just hearing what they were saying. I would understand more than if I had autopause on.
Yeah.
And that happened like a month or so ago.
Yep.
And yeah, it does really, really help. I think that there's a bit of an overemphasis on free flow right now in from what I see in the community, because I see a lot of people complain that they can't really get exactly what's happening. And it's almost always because of something that intensive immersion just solves. It just fixes that problem.
Yeah.
So
So
do it.
yeah, easy for us. We like it. So
Yeah. Easy for us to say, but yeah. Build the habit, get on the app, something like that. Something. So there's one more question. Might as well answer it.
yep,
Unless
go
you
for it.
have like a meeting or something at
I do not. It is the end
9
of the
p.m.
day.
Great. And Juliano asks, what are some big names in language learning that I should be aware of? And they list out some names. But I wanted to say this because, in my opinion, unless you're trying to get into like SLA and understand like the history of language learning and create research and like study linguistics and SLA and that sort of thing, I think that the main name you should know is your own and potentially like people that are you're learning alongside. I think putting too much emphasis on individual high profile learners can be damaging and unhelpful to your own goals because you want to conform yourself. What word am I looking for?
It is.
Compare yourself.
Go
To
for it.
compare yourself to people that have been learning for potentially tens of thousands of hours. I have probably 6,000 hours in Spanish or something like that, plus 1,000 hours in Czech. Like I've learned a bunch of like, I would not think, I don't think that a day one learner who's never learned a language before should try to do what I do. That's just doesn't work for them. They shouldn't do what Ethan does. It's not going to work for them. They should find out what works for them as a language learner, as a beginner, and focus on that. We try to give our best unbiased advice and like take into account everybody's experience, but like like we just said, like I said, do it on something that I enjoy, there is like an amount of bias there that can be harmful to a lot of aspiring learners because they go, oh, I'm not immediately as good as these people. What's my problem? I must be broken, which you're not broken. You're a normal human being and you're doing great.
I'd also say that time spent watching language YouTubers is not time spent language learning.
Potentially negative time.
And the opinions, one of the reasons that I started this company was because I could not make sense of the opinions because everyone had a different opinion. And you watch one YouTuber and they say one thing, you watch another YouTuber, they say a different thing, and it's hard to make sense of it. So don't get too caught up in trying to optimize everything. You will optimize for yourself as you go, and figure out what works for you. And in the meantime, just enjoy yourself and jump right in.
You know how all of the like finance people will be like, this is not financial advice. And
Yeah.
they proceed to give like what they think is financial advice, but it's actually just not good advice. Like, I feel like that's what a lot of language learning ends up being. It's like, that is your experience. That's your opinion. And that it's great if like to share that. That's totally fine. But also people aren't going to listen to that. This is not financial advice part. So
Yes. Buy
yeah,
Bitcoin.
buy Bitcoin. Just buy it and hold it. It's never going down. Ridiculous.
We need to put a
Um,
disclaimer there. People are going to do it and then sue
this is
us.
not language learning. This is not financial advice.
Nothing we say is financial advice.
Um, cool. I think we're done now. We're getting a
Cool.
little bit unhinged. Um,
It is Thursday.
and yeah, it is Thursday. God, it feels like Friday though. I'm
It
really ready for
does.
the weekend.
Yeah. Cool.
Um, okay.
Well, thank you everybody for attending. Thanks for all your great questions. We look forward to seeing you for the next one. And as a reminder, sign up for the waitlist. I'd love to get you in on the app. And we'll see you in the community on the app or back here on YouTube in a month.
Yeah. Bye everybody. I'll see you in the next video or whenever it is.